Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of Power BI Dev Camp for May 2022. Today, we'll be talking about custom functions and documentation in Power Query. With us, as always, is Ted Pattison from the Power BI Customer Advisory Team. I'll pass it over to Ted, who will introduce our special guest today. Ted, good morning.
Hey, how you doing, Daniel? Thanks very much for setting this up, and hello to everybody out there. Welcome to our May 2022 session of Power BI Dev Camp. If you've seen previous Dev Camps, you probably know I work with the Power BI Customer Advisory Team, and we have some real, very talented folks on that team, and I've brought one along here, my colleague and friend, Alex Powers, so it's great to have you here. The good news for me is I get to take the day off. I'll just hang out and chat and kind of answer questions as I come in. But with that, thank you, Alex, for hosting this session, and go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Ted, and thank you as well, Daniel. I was concerned with what you were going to say about our team, but I loved it. It was obviously a praise and lighthearted here, Ted, so thank you as always. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited here to talk to you about one of my favorite things, which is Power Query, and then, of course, custom functions and documentation. After today's event, if you'd like to kind of find the recordings and some of the material, as always, check out the Power BI Dev Camp website. This will be available there for you in terms of links, follow along samples, just so anything that we're doing today, you can also get your hands on kind of after the event. But for today's agenda, I really want to start with introducing some of the professional developer side here. So with the Power Query Language Service VS Code extension, if you're not using it today, hopefully I can win you over, convince you to install it, hopefully during the call, but if not, shortly thereafter. I just love kind of using it here, and I'll show you some of the great things that you can bring to your development. Discussing Power Query values, this will be both primitive and structured values. If you're like, what does that even mean? I've never heard these terms for Power Query. I agree. I always hang out with the DAX folks. They're talking about filter context, calculate context transitions. They have all these cool words and terms. I just never hear them as much here on the Power Query side. So this is my hour to be selfish and tell you all these cool things. And then hopefully in the future, we'll all start speaking the same language as we do more and more cool, fun things. But exploring custom functions, which is why we're here today. And then, of course, at the very end, just adding documentation. So why do all of these things kind of line up, and why am I so excited to be here? It's because the Power Platform release plan coming up later this year, there's going to be a new feature release. So this would be the personal query gallery. With this, we can take all of our custom functions. We can store these up in the Power BI service. Then this way we can easily reuse them. So, we developed this really cool transformation today. We forgot which file we stored it in or which GitHub repo we'd kind of, saved a file out to. We can have it all up in the service. That's going to be awesome. With that, though, what in the heck was I even doing when I developed that transformation? That's where our documentation is so important. So as we start learning about enriching these custom functions with this metadata, this is all leading to this bigger picture here of the personal query gallery. Ted, I'm going to kind of ask you, like, how life-saving will this be for you in terms of having a query gallery to save all of your stuff?
It'll be great. Just to have a common repository and kind of think of them as code that we write and share, as opposed to something that's stored away somewhere in the corner of my PBX file.
Agreed. And especially, this is just for your single user kind of experience here, just right out of the gate. We have to believe, though, Ted, that in the future I can share mine with you. You can share some transformations with me. Like, that would just be so cool when we get to that point where we can start sharing queries, across our organization, sharing those structured business logic, and then whatever other fun things that we may need to incorporate. But this is why I'm so excited to be here today, is because all of the hard work we can do to learn it today will just reinforce when we get to that public preview kind of later this year. But with that, for these session materials, we're going to be following along here just within the public GitHub repo. If you are on a workstation here, you can also navigate to this link, so ak.ms/PBI workshops. Out here, there are a ton of repositories that I often work on for the professional developers. So if you're doing tabular editor model development, DAX Studio, ALM Toolkit, paginated reports, whatever it may be, I've got a lot of just easy to follow along with. Hopefully less than 60 minutes of your time. And then at the very end, I'll tell you where you should go next, kind of continue in your journey. But with that, let's get out of this PowerPoint. You know me, I try and stay out of there as much as I can. So out in the repo, QBI workshops, the one that we're going to be following along with is the Power Query custom functions. So if you click into that here now, we're just going to dive right in. So the language that we are talking about today is the Power Query formula language. That is the official title. Informally, it's known as the M language. So if you hear M, it stands for mashup. So this is the mashup language. It is both a querying and a functional language. So not only just getting data, extracting, doing some transformations, but if we need to do cool things like iterative looping, I know we talked about some recursion at a user group last night. You can do a lot of those things too. Case sensitive though, so when I say uppercase, it really truly means uppercase. And of course, when I say lowercase, you have to do lowercase, otherwise you'll start getting those errors just within your development. Next up, the Power Query language service for VS Code. I told you I'm going to try and win you over on this by the end of the hour. With this though, if you're used to the advanced editor within obviously Power BI, maybe even within Excel, and then even into the Power Query online experience, it would be great if we had things like autocomplete, maybe even some functional hints when we hover above some of our values, some code formatting, my goodness, readable code goes such a long way. All that is possible with the Power Query language extension. So I'll jump over into VS Code. On the left-hand side here, we have our extensions button. All you have to do is just type in Power Query. And you can see here that there is an official Microsoft release. On your side, it may show at the very top here, just press install. If you go ahead and do that, it will be installed for you. And then whenever you start creating some .pq files, you can take advantage of a lot of these different capabilities. Ted, I'll ask you honestly, are you using the VS Code extension yourself today? Or are you still doing maybe some Visual Studio, the SDK?
I haven't used it, so the last time I really kind of drilled down, I used the Visual Studio kind of add-in for doing custom connectors, which gave you IntelliSense and stuff. I'm not sure how long this has been out for. When did this come out?
A couple of years at this point, and they're still making some regular updates here on the kind of the right-hand side here, so we can see May 4th. The one item here, Ted, that I do want to call out is unfortunately you can't execute against the mashup engine. So this is purely just code formatting, writing code. So if you are looking for, a standalone experience where you can both write your code and then press F5 and run it, the Power Query SDK in Visual Studio, that would still be something that I would probably tell people to look into. But I'm just looking for the lightweight editing. VS Code, absolutely love it. So I would encourage everyone to go check it out.
I think I'm a little bit behind the times. I still think Crocs are cool. So go ahead. Don't let me hold you up.
Awesome. Thanks, Ted. Just want to make that clear for everyone. So thank you there. Power Query values. So I talked about these terms, both the primitive values and structured values. And this is always where I wish that I was just a better instructor when it came to some of this information, because there's nothing that I can teach you. You already know all of these things. You know what a string value is. Here with text, the text hello world. You know what a logical value is in terms of true, false, numbers. Of course, we have different types here within Power Query. So we have int8, int16, 32, 64, currency.type, decimal.type. Whew. 10, -15, 10.15. They're important. I would recommend researching them. And the reason why, and I'll come down here just a little bit, because this is once again why I love this page, is I'll tell you where to go next. So if you're curious about the Power Query data types, this article will take you just to all of this information. And Ted, you and me kind of see this a lot in our day jobs, where people are maybe misclassifying their type of their column and kind of getting the wrong compression rates. Maybe they're doing decimal when it should really just be like a fixed decimal number. Do you come across that a lot, Ted?
Definitely, we see that, and just using the wrong type and not having it understand something on the query side, or so absolutely having a focus on get the right type as you're doing the transform is important.
Now, I'll specifically call out here the decimal numbers. They seem innocent just upon first glance, but they store up to 15 digits long. If you are not storing that many pennies out in your business, and really you're just looking for the 0.00 cents. The currency value holds up to 4 digits to its right place. So better compression rates. Just make sure you're applying the correct type. I just can't stress that enough for folks. Cool. Whew. All right, so numbers, time. I'm looking at this hash time value 150515. What does that mean in the real world? It means hours, minutes, seconds. If I was to look at date, 2022-0630. All right, so year, month, day. Date time is year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds. We see that there's a pattern here. All these different primitive values. Now, of course, we want to do something more than just one value at a time. Of course, maybe we have a list of lists, kind of an array here. So looking at structured values. So our list.type here being a curly brace, number 10, double quotes with cats to store our string, and then a date value here of 2022-0704, so that is July 4th, 2022. Looking forward to vacation on that time, but list, records, a record, I have a key value pair. So A equals 10, B equals a list of values of 1, 2, 3, and C equals pizza. I can store multiple data types. And then very similar here with the table. So table of animal, or count, cat 99, dog 1, bear 3. It looks like a lot of weird characters kind of bunched together. So let me go ahead and grab this here real quick, and I'll jump over into VS Code. I'll do a new file. Go ahead and paste this here now. We're going to start out with the let statements. We're going to do our source, just a quick source step, and then do, there we go. Bottom right here, VS Code, you can select your language mode. You can also do it in the shortcut. Right here, I'll select Power Query. Now have some code highlighting, which I absolutely love here, and then Control Shift, format my document. Readable M language. So that long list here just a second ago, it didn't really make a lot of sense. Why are there 2 curly braces? If I was to redo it again, I now see here that my first items are my column headers, so the animal and then the count, and then I have a list of lists with the cat 99, dog 1, and bear 3. Copying and pasting this now just into our Power BI desktop application. New blank query, and I'll make this a little bit bigger here in just 1 second. Get this pasted. Awesome. So exact same code that we had before. Copy, paste, done. Animal, count. So nothing too challenging here. We understand the primitive values of what a text value is, what a date value is, what a time value is. Just if you don't have the basics here in terms of the foundational structures, just build one at a time. What is a list value? It's just lists are stored in the curly braces. Records are stored in square brackets, and then tables do have a little bit more here in terms of that structure. But right off the bat, it's going to be what are your column headers, and then what are the values within that table. Ted, I'll pause here. Like, any questions from our audience, and then of course from your own experience, like, are you talking to a lot of people about primitive and structured values, or is this just not come up very often for you?
Well, there's the crowd in Power Query that never wants to go to the advanced editor, and at that point, but for those who are willing to think it's a great thing to be able to get in and have that kind of control, it's just amazing the data structures, and it just kind of depends on the data you're working with, and if it you think adding something and putting it into a complicated structure is what you need, it just gives you ultimate flexibility.
I agree. And I love seeing that one of our team members, Patrick LeBlanc, he's been diving in a little bit more into the advanced editor, and he's just been, his mind has been opened up. Now seeing that is both that querying language and that functional language all at the same time.
Okay, here's one question for you.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate to use the currency type when the data is not currency?
Well, I would ask, like, are there decimal places, or is it just a whole number? If it's a whole number, obviously we could stick within our int 64.types, which is kind of the default, or you could drop it down into a 8, 16, 32, just depending upon what is the value of your, what is the range of your values.
Because Power Query will catch those errors.
Because
then you always sound smart whether you are or not.
But if you don't have decimals, don't use the currency or decimal types. Just stick with the whole numbers. You'll get a better compression rate. Awesome. So custom functions. So we've learned the foundation here just of primitive and structured values. We now want to start doing things with this, having transformation logic that we can just reapply over and over again because we wrote this beautiful handwritten code and, I never want to do any points and clicks ever again. So how we can do this is we're going to provide the set of our inputs for an expected single output. In this example here, our first one, it's going to be the goes to symbol, which will be how we can activate just a custom function. So does this equal sign and then a greater than sign. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this here now and jump out into our Power Query experience and right off the bat. Awesome. Got double parentheses here. My goes to symbol, got a string value that's going to be returned. Every time that I press invoke, what is going to happen? We're going to get the word hello world. Press it again, hello world, press it again, hello world, from here until the end of eternity, hello world. I did say one thing though, I said that, I'm expecting it to be a text value, but that's not necessarily what Power Query thinks. What is the expected return value here of this function? Ed, that's even a challenge for you. How is Power Query thinking about this function's return value?
I was thinking the return value is a function.
Right here, right? So the value is going to be of data type any. So we've not classified it. So it is an implicit return value. We're going to jump out here. Implicit return values.
It's a no-brainer. Hey, you're pointing to a function. If you don't program, you're like, what the heck is going on there?
Yep. So Power Query will take its best guess, and it will say, I think this is what you were trying to accomplish with returning a text value. But right off the bat, it's an any value. If I needed to be very, I need to hard code this and kind of hard my solution here that I only ever want this thing to be returned as a text value. This is the explicit return value. So both, if you're familiar with kind of the DAX side of the world, there's implicit measures and explicit measures. So on our side here with Power Query, we have both implicit return values and explicit return values. So let's try this one here then, Ted. Do a new query, blank query. I'm going to drop this in here again. The only thing that we changed here was at the very top is the as text. So I'm not passing any values through, but at the very end here, after my goes to symbol, I expect a text value to be returned. So function as text. So explicitly defining this. Press invoke, hello world, press invoke, hello world, press invoke, hello world. Not a huge difference, but from a programming side, if you submit a number to me, like that's a pretty big deal. I'm expecting text for this entire thing of instructions to work. So I'll pause here, Ted. Are you seeing a lot of explicit values being defined, kind of maybe in your day-to-day or in some of the projects that you're getting pulled into?
To some degree. And, then sometimes people don't type things, or they type the parameters, but they don't type the return value, and sometimes, the mashup engine can figure it out. And other times you're just going to be more efficient, if you kind of take away the ambiguity and you let it do optimizations behind the scenes. So I think it's always better. But I think there's lots of untyped Power Query code that's just running fine in production.
I agree. So it's not always necessary. We got to the same end result here in terms of the hello world. But as you start doing more and more complicated things, hopefully at the end of the day, you're not the person that they're coming back to, with all the Teams messages and Outlook and saying, come and fix my thing. My refresh is broken. Well, what did you submit? What's different? These type of opportunities to explicitly define the return values just help you immensely there. So let's try this again then here. We've not been passing anything through. At some point, though, we do want to start asking our end users for values. So with required parameters here now, I would like to introduce and give you salutations here with your full name. So I'll go ahead and copy this. We'll jump into the Power Query editor again. New query, blank query. Very cool. So let's take a look. Got a hash symbol, equal sign, full name. The reason why the hash exists is just because that space, it's that special character. The expected value that I'm looking for from my user is going to be text value. And then just obviously here at the very end, it's going to be hello and then the full name. So I'm going to type in here, Alex Powers, press invoke, hello, Alex Powers. If I was to do it again here, hello, Ted. Cool. I can pass in different values. One thing though, what is that expected return value? Right here, it's any again. So if I wanted to, I could obviously just pass in hello 10, return this here. It's going to convert my numeric value of 10 into a string. I don't have any hardening here in terms of the solution. So this is where I would start suggesting like defining what it is you're passing in and then also what it is you're expecting to have returned at the very end. So let me hit this just a little bit. So as text, and I'm going to change this to a number. Of course, everything is breaking here now. Passing in 10, getting text, expression error. We cannot apply an operator of both types, text and number. So if you're trying to mix and match here and you've misdefined them, this is where errors start happening. A nice fun little thing here that we'll kind of demonstrate with the audience is there is now a new Power Query capability here with both the try catch. So in this example, I can go and catch my error. So I'll do message. So we cannot apply operator and to types text and number. So if you do need to have some logical flows within maybe your Power Query, you can now catch those error messages. So that's a really fun one. You've not seen it yet out on the blog. So if you're attending this here today, write it down. Try catch now exists, and it works both in Power BI and Excel. If you want to go and check it out in either of those applications. Cool. So required parameters, requiring the specific data types. What if we do want to incorporate some logic where maybe this isn't needed, and we can make it being optional. So with optional parameters here now, copy this again, run over into our new query. Expand this here just a little bit. Optional at the very beginning of our value, of our parameter name. The expected value we're looking for is going to be text. Our explicit return value is actually still an any, so we didn't define what it is that we're looking for. So this is now an implicit return. And then we have the logic. So if full name is going to be a null value, then just simply return hello, otherwise return the full name. So in this example, if I press invoke, we get the return of hello because it was a null value. Or if we do kind of the hello Alex Powers. So you can incorporate additional steps, additional logic, if this, then that, maybe supplying parameters, maybe avoiding them, just with the optional keyword within the parameters. That's a lot. So let me stop here. Ted, is there any questions maybe bubbling up from the chat?
Not that, I think we're kind of got some that we're answering here. I think you can keep going and I'll call out if there's one that I want you to answer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ted. All right, so let's come back down to earth. I don't think everyone is going to be doing a bunch of single line transformations. More than likely, you'll be recording a lot of your steps, in multiple step values here with the let expressions. So this is where we can now store our step identifiers. And then the identifier here, you can think of it like a variable, if you're familiar with other programming languages, where we're storing the value. And then if we call upon that just in the future steps, then we can recall that value. So step identifiers do take two different forms. One could be without the hash and kind of the double quotes. That's just where a special character is not required. So in this example, we have greeting. We have another one called yelling, and then we have another one. Why are we yelling a lot here? Just because we're using both spaces and the question mark. So in this example, I'm actually going to run over into VS Code. It still looks like that cheeseburger where everything just mashed together. It's difficult to read. So I'm going to go ahead and format our document here now. Awesome. This looks a lot better, a lot easier to read. So first, right off the bat, my step identifiers are greeting. If I was to hover above this, I see here that the greeting in the expected return is going to be that of text. So at the very end here, whenever I call in the value greeting, my explicit return value is going to be text. With this text, so as you're starting to learn more about transformations, the pattern is going to be what is the primitive data type. So my data type is text, and then what is the transformation that you would like to do on top of it? So in this case, I would like to take text and I'd like to change it into an uppercase. So upper. Text.lower, if we were using maybe a date value. So we could then do date.year, date.month. So it is your data type, period, transformation. That's how you can start learning the language here. So what is the data type I'm trying to use? And then what is it that I'm trying to kind of do on top of it? So with this here, I have a list at the very end of transformations where I would like to take my yelling, where I'm yelling, salutations here, and I'd like to repeat it a specified number of times. So with list repeats, my first argument here is going to be the list, and then my second argument is going to be the count. So how many times did I like to perform this operation? Go and copy this here now. We'll jump back into the query editor here. The query pane is just lining up. So let's do blank query, advanced editor. Everything looks the same, looks great. I've got the green checkbox here. I'll press done. Two different parameters. One is required, one is optional. So right off the bat here, in terms of the custom functions, if you are going to have optional parameters, they will have to be at the very end here of your function. So all of the required are on the left-hand side. If any of them are optional, they have to be at the very end here on the right. So just kind of keep that in mind. If we were to try and change the order here, it will go ahead and throw an error here for us. Now I have a required argument following an optional argument. So keep that in mind, optional at the end. Jump back in here, paste this. Let's quick edit. Awesome. So here's my name, Alex Powers. I'd like to repeat it. Oh, repeated 10 times, then my first name. Actually, I do want to make sure that that's right. Yep. Press invoke, hey, Alex Powers, repeated 10 different times. So my first argument was satisfied. Second one was optional, if you recall. So if I was actually to just remove it over here, it would still work. Hey, 10 different times. Now I'll ask the audience here, and obviously you can respond either within the chat, but what is the expected return type of this? Hopefully it should be becoming more and more obvious here the more times you're seeing this, but what is the expected return type? And Ted, I'll throw that question out to you. Is it an implicit value or an explicit?
Well, I mean, I could look to the left and see the FX icon and say that it expects to return a function. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
So here at the very end of our function,
as any,
yeah. So unfortunately, this is still an implicit return value. If I wanted to actually update this, so as a list, say I want to return a list of values here, so I could do it once again, 100. First name Alex, press invoke. I satisfied, everything is good. There are no, if I was to return a date or a time or whatever else it may be, explicitly would say, I'm sorry, I can't satisfy that you were in the list in terms of returns. So just keep that in mind as you're starting to learn more about functions, optional parameters, then also your expected returns. Whew. We pause here. Ted, anything? It's in the chat.
Well, Artemis pointed out, be careful with return types here, as functions don't permit null returns. So that's something where you could get burned. So just kind of keep that in mind.
I agree.
What are your potential return values?
And thank you so much, Artemis, for hanging out here too, and all the work you did on the try catch. So very simple commenting of your steps here within Power Query. At the very least, just having a little bit of documentation to figure out, well, what was I doing in these before? Two different ways. One could be just typing in the to back whacks here, or the control kind of back whack. So let's do that here now. I'll do copied, and then in the Power Query, go and delete some of these here. I got to free up some of my space. Awesome. Light query. Here's a code comment. Here's a code comment. Another code comment. Control / will turn those off. And obviously you can see there, it's just yelling at me saying, what is it you're trying to do? Just two simple slashes here and we're back into the comments. I press done. One of the great things is on the right-hand side of our applied steps, we now have these information icons. If I was to hover above this now, this step stores the current system date time. Our next step extracts the date part. And then obviously here at the very end, the year only. One important call out is your comments have to be above the steps. So if I was to take this comment here, if I was to move it to the very end, and obviously this is up to everyone how they choose to kind of lead code comments, but press done, that code comment is now gone. So it has to be above your step. Just an important item there. If you're more of the SQL kind of background, kind of doing multi-line code comments, the keyboard keys, the slash, and then the star, and then the star and the slash are applicable over here within Power Query as well. So if you want to kind of write more of a larger book in terms of the notes and the descriptions here, more than able to. And then the keyboard shortcut is going to be Alt, Shift, and then A. So let's go and copy this. Let's see what this looks like here now over within the Power Query editor. The multi-line comments here from line number 2 to 5, Alt, Shift, and A, if we recall, was kind of the shortcut there. We'll go ahead and get that removed for us. I guess it'll update it here. So let's go ahead and press done. Right-hand side, I do have my information icon. I would love to see this multi-line view here with all the indents. Hover above it. Unfortunately, not the case. So if you are going to do something proper, just kind of keep that in mind. It may be for you in that advanced editor, but you at least know that there is some documentation just based upon the icons.
Quick question from Alan.
Yeah.
Does it read out multi-line comments?
Find that again for me, Ted. What are you thinking there? Does it read out?
Read out multi-line comments? I guess the single-line comments seem to disappear. But these, as long as you don't put them to the side, they're not going to disappear. I guess that's kind of, maybe you asked the question before you kind of showed that aspect of it there.
Yeah, it's supposed to be above the step. So like in this example, I moved it to the right of kind of the step, and unfortunately it's now lost. If we were to move it to the very beginning here though, obviously it is now returned here with that icon. So I'm not really sure the full context of the question, but if you can expand on it for us in the chat, we'd be happy to dive into a little bit more for us later. Awesome. Then Ted, do you use the multi-line or the two back whacks? I'm not sure what generation and era of code commenting you're from.
Back whacks for me.
Really?
C#.
Awesome. Well, it's cool that some things are transferable. So that's where I was very excited when I came in to start learning the language. It's like, oh my gosh, like I don't have to learn a new way to comment. And some languages, they have some funky methods around them. All right, so if you would like to learn more about comments, obviously just check out the links. And then also for the advanced editor shortcuts, just a fantastic community resource here with Daniel Maslick. He goes over some additional items here to just take your development to the next level if you're a keyboard shortcut fan.
Can we leave comments on your feedback on comments?
Yes, of course. All right. we've been building the foundation here. It's now time to start talking about actual documentation. Let's dive right in here. A lot of it is going to be based upon metadata. And for that, we wanted to store them in a record. So if we recall records are stored in our square brackets. So in this example, we're going to define our type here. We're just going to have our custom function. We're going to have a little bit of metadata that we're going to build with our record. And then we're going to replace our existing function and these values with this update. So we're going to replace that metadata. So let's see what this looks like actually in the editor. So let's do new query, blank query. Awesome. So line number 2, just a simple step identifier of fx hello world. Our goes to symbol here now for a function. So step number 2 is going to store a function for us. Whenever we call in that function, it's going to return the hello world. Next up is going to be our documentation. And this does actually follow a very explicit kind of return here. So let me go and showcase that here 1 second. Here we go. Documentation.field caption, field descriptions, allowed values. So when we are over here, ours is going to be our documentation.name, and this is my first line of code. And then this is where we start getting into replacing some of this information. So I have a function. I want to replace the existing metadata type of my function with this updated documentation. So I'll press done, and we'll kind of dive in a little bit here. But this is my first line of code. If I recall here, my first line of code, whenever I press this invoke, we expect to have the hello world return value. Press invoke hello world, press invoke hello world. And then of course here at the very end, our function is our any data type. So there's a lot of things going on here. Let's step back though and like start seeing, well, how are all the other functions doing it? SQL database connector. So I'll do a copy here. We do a value.type. Actually, let me do this here. So SQL.database. There we go. If you type in the name of the function, if you don't include the parameters, it will return all of the documentation of that function. So here's our name, here's descriptions, here's all the parameters, here are all the optional parameters that we saw earlier. Here's the expected return type at the very end here. So it is the expected return value of a table. All of this rich metadata here for the SQL.database function. So if I was to do a value type, yes, the SQL.database is a function. We just saw all of that rich information. And then with this, I would like to understand, well, what is the metadata that's kind of storing all this? So of this function, show me the metadata, value.metadata. Documentation.name, documentation.description, the category. So where should end up here in terms of our function library, and then just any examples, which we can include within a list. So all of these standard names, this is how we can incorporate documentation within our custom functions ourselves. All just by replacing the metadata. Right, so we've learned a little bit here. How can I just incorporate some new things here? So I've got my descriptions here, or my long descriptions, and also examples. So we have our hello world. I'd like to add a little bit more here within the description now. So I'll go back to my original kind of invoke my first line of code. And let's jump into the advanced editor. I want to add that description, documentation.description. Whenever I press this button, I'll get the word hello world. this double code. There we go. Press done. Whenever I press this button, I'll get the word hello world. So I've got my name, I've got my descriptions. Maybe I can start adding some examples. So if I was to jump back here, remembering examples expects a list of records. So a list of record objects. So I remember lists are the curly braces. I remember records are the squares. And then the items here that I can satisfy are going to be the description, code, and then my result. So let's try this again. So documentation dot examples. This is a record. And then what was the 3 description code results? Description, code, results. Awesome. So our result is going to be hello world. Whenever you do this, you'll get hello world for the 100th time in this demo. The code is just going to be simply hello world. The expected result is going to be hello world. Press done. Example. Whenever you do this, you'll get hello world for the 100th time in this demo. All right, I'm starting to see the bigger picture now here of how a simple return like hello world could be expanded and shared with other people, or even stored out in kind of this personal query gallery. A lot is going to be driven based on this metadata and what I include with it, all the examples that I can provide to my end users kind of as I move forward here. So if I needed to provide more context, I can just copy and paste this. Hello world, world, but this time in Spanish. Oh, I've got more examples here. It's pretty interesting. Just all of this built on just simple metadata replacement of my existing function. To parameters. This is getting a little bit more complex as we kind of jump into this last area here, where we have documentation of all of our parameters. So both allowed values. So if I think of dev test prod, maybe it's a database, maybe it's a lake, maybe you got bronze, silver, gold. If you're saying explicitly, I am only allowing these values within my parameter, that would be incredible for your end users not have to guess what it is that they're supposed to supply. You've just simply given them that list. Maybe it's a multi-line option here where you're allowing them to write just a massive book of text kind of within the field parameters, and of course just out any code samples as well. But before we move on to parameter documentation, Ted, I'm going to ask you one last time, any questions here just as it relates to kind of the metadata of our functions?
No, there's a conceptual question you can answer now or later. Can you conditionally branch out within Power Query? Yeah. Come from a procedural background, not a function-based language, and I'm kind of used to writing if this, then do this. If not, do something else.
And I'll ask Ted, did you answer the question? Felt like you did.
What's that?
Did you answer the question? You said
I have not answered the question yet, but it's I think it's just a different way of programming that you don't really have conditional branch out logic, because to me that's procedural coding. And one of the big differences between procedural coding and a function-based language where it's all about evaluation.
I agree.
So I didn't really have a good answer.
No, I loved your response. This is like, I don't know that I need to say anything. Ted did a great job there. So let's move then into kind of parameter-based documentation here. So we talked about it a little bit. I should just copy this entire massive thing kind of into our window here now. And then, Ted, like how often do you generally allow for some Q&A at the end? Try and leave 5 or 10?
Go up to the end of the hour. So
awesome. Well, then let's do that here. I'm going to create a new blank query. Then we'll move this into, just give me one moment here. So I'm going to start out. I'm just an incredible pizza fan here, especially on the pineapple kind. So I'm just going to start out with creating my own pizza function. So with this, I'm going to say my arguments are going to be my first topping. I'm expecting text. And then, of course, my second topping is going to be text as well. My explicit returned value is going to be as text. And I know someone earlier had mentioned also kind of nullable values, which you can do if you needed to, but I do need to return something here with my text. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and do a text.combine, right? Because the value that I need to transform is that of a text value. So text is my data type, and then here are my transformations. So within this, I have a list of values. Let's hit responds. Awesome. So the best pizza in the world is my first topping. And I'll do and my second topping. So I've got my two arguments here. And then what is my separator here? If I can get out of that menu, my separator is just gonna be a space. Cool. Press done. First topping, second topping. First is always gonna be that pineapple. And I can already hear people groaning in the audience. They're never gonna invite me to their pizza party here, but if I press invoke, the best pizza in the world is pineapple and jalapeno. Just that sweet heat, it's tough to beat. So I know what everyone is saying, though. I'm going to make sure that we define what it is to not allow you to type in any entry here. A lot of that's going to be through our parameter documentation. Let's jump back into the advanced editor. So how can we enrich this with metadata? So let's move on to our next step here now. My pizza type is going to be a type function because I need to replace my existing function. The first item here is going to be my first topping. It's going to be as. It's going to be of type text, and then the metadata here for my first value. So documentation.field caption, first topping of choice. And spell correctly, documentation. Documentation field description equals choose the first topping on the pizza, and then everyone's favorite here, documentation.allowed values. There's no way we're letting this pineapple guy in. So you're saying it's only going to be allowing sausage, pepperoni, and then maybe we'll do Canadian bacon. Unless you have a special request for me, Ted, in terms of your pizza.
No, I just don't think pineapple on pizza is appropriate, but go ahead.
All right, so let me get here to the end. I might have to copy and paste this. You can hear some people on the side. So, cool. That's done. And then I now need to replace some metadata here of my values. So at the very bottom, I've got my return value.replace type. Got my pizza function I'd like to replace with my pizza type in terms of this metadata here. Press done. I now see drop-down boxes in terms of my parameter values. So my first topping of choice, if I select this here now, sausage, pepperoni, or Canadian bacon. Second topping of choice, if I was to hover above here, it gives me that description. So choose the second topping of your pizza. So in both of these options, I've explicitly defined what it is that my end users can select. I press invoke. The best pizza in the world is pepperoni and jalapeno. Reason why I'm kind of showing this here at the very end in terms of having parameters and allowed values is going to be that at any point in time, people can come out here and still change these. So these are purely just suggestions. They are not explicitly and hard-coded defined. So especially as you kind of move forward thinking about, well, how could I incorporate this with my dev test prod server addresses, or even some other parameter-based options. Great for suggestions. They don't enforce the law, though, in terms of people coming into the advanced editor and maybe doing some custom editing. Whew. So let me jump back out here to our final screen. Awesome. Handling documentation, everything that we've talked about over the past hour here in terms of defining just a simple hello world, kind of seeing it brought to light here with some of the metadata and enriching it with descriptions, different values here in terms of our allowed parameters. All of this builds towards building a custom connector. So hopefully in the future session, me and Ted will come back and kind of do a session with this. But if you can get to the end of all this hour here through the GitHub repo and obviously through all these basic examples, you're not that far off from building your own custom Power Query connector. So if that is something that you might be interested in a future session, we would absolutely love to do that. But with that, let me go and pause there, Ted. Just any questions maybe from our audience?
We have something from Sherry. While this is really neat, I'm trying to understand the use cases for these examples in a reports or dashboard. Do you have a place that we can see these things in motion?
Define kind of report or dashboard. This is all purely for kind of the ETL portion of Power BI. So this is more of getting your data ready, extracting it from a system, if that was to kind of be the case. Unless there's more context, Daniel.
Not at this time. I did have a response, I believe, from someone before who had a question regarding branching out. Is that? Oh, yeah, conditionally branching out. So I think they wrote back and they said, the reason I need to branch out is I'm trying to avoid refreshing a query many times in a day.
So that's where I'd be curious if you couldn't just use kind of a data flow and just reusing that transformation logic in kind of some of your other downstream, maybe BI artifacts, whether it be data set or now data marts or something to that effect. But maybe we just need some more context on that one. Anything else, Daniel, that we're seeing?
A lot of comments about pizza. It's a very divisive issue, but nothing else at this time. Let me just do one more check at the bottom. Oh, here is one from Chris. Can you use the, can you use the allowed values to validate data when processing, or is it just for active invocations? Although the try catch will be good for this anyway.
Yeah, I'd be kind of curious, just what is the basis with that question? So if you have more context, please provide it. I would say for me, and the way that I would approach a lot of these is just having, this simple logic where you've had as much explicitly defined for your end users where they can't kind of trip up, maybe lose an address in terms of a server or kind of understanding, well, what are the allowed values? Way I'm hearing people approach this as they start thinking about the personal query gallery, maybe they've defined some machine learning logic and they're calling a custom API. Within that, they need to have some explicit parameters defined. They just don't want to have that as like a passed around handwritten note. So how can they incorporate these drop downs or these kind of descriptions within their business users where they can just easily come out here and kind of run these and invoke these functions? But that's how I'm starting to see people process this.
You got time for one more?
Of course.
All right. Can we have an example of how to invoke function from another query? From Kunal.
Yeah. So let's do this one, right? So FX pizza. I mean, we've defined a function right here in this example. So I'll do a new blank query and I'll just call my FX pizza. So if I don't include the open and close parentheses, I remember I get the descriptions here. If I was to do just as equal, what is it, value.type? I understand it's a function. And then what is it, value.metadata? Of course, I don't have it right here. But with this, you can call your function just by calling the names explicitly here, so FX pizza. And then if I just pass in values here of pineapple and bacon. So anywhere you're at in another function or kind of transformation logic, you just call it by the name. And then as long as you satisfy the arguments, you'll get your explicit return value here. Anything else, Daniel?
Let's see. We have will using VS Code to format have any negative effects on the applied steps UI in PQ?
No, it does not. So it's purely just a just more of an aesthetic. So it's not going to run faster or it's not going to run any slower. But the reason why I like it is it makes life so much more readable whenever you're coming out here, and especially as you have kind of the hover above capabilities here of, well, what was I trying to do or what was I trying to accomplish? Like in this example, if I hover above my pizza function, if it responds, apparently, you'll get the, there you go. You get the variables, you get all the definitions, you get all the return types. It just makes for a much easier kind of development environment. That's what I've found.
Questions keep coming, Alex, if that's all right.
Yeah, keep going.
Can we pass parameter values to the SQL database through coding?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. So especially as you're starting to do things with the SQL.database, there are a lot of options here. So at the very end here, optional values that you can pass through, and then there's also value.native query where you can kind of run some options here against the SQL server. Daniel, I'll pass it back whenever you're ready. Kind of get us out of here then.
I wanted to recommend that everybody check out the Power BI community at community.powerbi.com for all the resources, in terms of past sessions and this session as well. I also wanted to promote the Power BI Dev Camps coming up in June and July. We have in June, Ted will be back for writing Azure functions to call the Power BI REST API on June 30th at 11 a.m. Pacific, as well as the Power BI Dev Camp in July, bringing Power BI into the Dataverse through the magic of Synapse, and that's with Scott Sewell on Thursday, July 28th at 11 a.m. Pacific. Thank you all so much for being here, Alex and Ted. Thank you again, and really appreciate everyone with all your questions, and have a great rest of your day or evening, and we'll see you in the community. Thanks so much.